Happy Friday. Happy Morph Market Friday. Episode 5. We have the one and only mayor of Chondro Town, my good friend, Bill Stegall in the house. Happy Friday, Bill.
Happy New Year, MJ. I hope you and your family had a good New Year, good Christmas. It's good to see you.
It is a new year, isn't it?
It is. It seems like it's a new year. Always good to sit down and talk green trees with you. We certainly do it enough, right?
Yeah, we sure do. And, listen, shout out to Morph Market being one of the biggest platforms to go find a snake first and foremost, and one of the biggest reasons why I'm excited to have you on here is to talk about the big popularity with green tree pythons, but definitely how to direct people in the right direction when it comes to buying your first green tree python. Because don't you feel like that sets the tone for your whole experience being in the green tree python community and the hobby part of it?
The worst nightmare is for somebody to come into the community and not succeed with their first green tree. Because for a lot of people, not all of them, but a lot of people, it just wrecks, it wrecks the experience, and it wrecks, really a potential lifetime of future interacting with these animals. I wish I had gotten into green tree pythons 10 years before I did, but it was their reputation of being difficult to keep and defensive and hands off that kept me away from them for such a long time. So,
yeah. Well, definitely one thing we were going to cover also is, like, even if you do everything right, there's just some things you can't avoid, right? Like, you will sometimes get the shorter end of having a chondro for the first time, and just something that can happen out of your control. Like, that's another thing about appreciating the green tree python game is, like, you will have humbling moments no matter how good you are at keeping, right?
Yeah, there's no doubt. They're no different than any other reptile. I don't think that they're any more susceptible or withstanding of something like that happen. But, you've heard me say this a million times. You get the right green tree from the right person and put it in the right box, and you're going to have a very high rate of first-time success.
Yeah, so listen, before we go further and deeper into things, why don't you give people a little background about Phoenix Reptiles? Obviously people, if they can't catch the hint already, we already know kind of what your foundation is as far as what reptile you breed, but give us everything as far as what it is that you breed, Bill, and the relationship that you have with Morph Market, because from what I know, you're a founding member. So let's hear it.
Yeah, I've been around a long time. I started with ball pythons probably around the year 2000, maybe 1999.
Nice.
Started with ball pythons. It was just a few years after that I was introduced to carpet pythons, and I did carpet pythons for a long time. A decade or longer.
Right.
And, it was about that time that Morph Market was starting to become an entity or at least a thought in the back of John Lehman's mind. John, who is the original founder and owner of Morph Market, was from the Dallas area. I knew John. And when this concept was coming together, really it was probably 2014, I spoke with him. I consulted him primarily on carpet python and green tree python categories, right? Because they're different. They're a lot different than ball python categories. With the carpet pythons, you've got the species and subspecies. Then you've got the morphs, and some of the genetics are recessive. Some of them are incomplete dominant. Some are polygenic. So all that stuff had to be, taken into consideration. And then with the green trees, the locality stuff versus designer, imports, farm bred, captive bred, and I'm sure you could do the same thing with boas and everything else that's represented on Morph Market. But at least for those two classifications, John, asked me for some input, and I gave it to him.
Yeah, and so you've seen all the stages of Morph Market, and I'm curious, how do you feel about where Morph Market's at today, Bill?
I mean, it's just turned into this monster. It's it's the by far the biggest and best reptile marketplace platform that we as buyers and sellers have ever been exposed to, particularly if you're a buyer. I think, the days of king snake and fauna classifieds, where it was kind of like the wild, wild west, and there was nobody really watching the store, and anybody could go on and sell anything. And, those days are long gone, and Morph Market has really been the one that's come in and kind of laid down the law, and you can't be a dirtbag, and last very long on Morph Market. So I applaud them for doing that. And now they've moved into other stuff like selling supplies and reptile shipping. So, I'm a big fan, founding member and still a member.
Yeah, awesome to hear. Now, obviously, Bill, I don't want to beat around the bush. Like, you breed a lot of green tree pythons. You put in your time, which I feel like, which kind of leads to why that you have this kind of success that you're having. But you don't have to sell a lot of snakes, green tree pythons on Morph Market, because the way you are, like, the way you have a following and the way you're able to build your customer base. But we know that green tree pythons have skyrocketed popularity over the last few years, especially because of All in the Tree Tuesdays, which you can catch Bill on Trap Talk Reptile Network every Tuesday. All right, unless he's in Cancun. Yeah. But you go to Morph Market now, you see tons of green tree pythons, right? And mind you, some of them look fine, some look beautiful, but so many mislabeled. And obviously, like green tree python, the one thing I love about the green tree python community, as far as people who've been breeding and have documentation, is like they don't mess around. You guys don't mess around. You guys are very like on top of your lineage charts. Like what you guys send out has attached paperwork to it, right? But then how do you feel about seeing something that's happening where a lot of things are being claimed to be United States captive-born and bred, Bill, but we know just by looking at a photo that's simply not the case, right? And I'm trying to get to like how we could help a first-time chondro buyer vet the right person to buy from, right? So yeah, sure. Let's hear it.
Well, I think Morph Market is a great place to start. And you said there were so many green trees listed on Morph Market. I looked last night, there were 60, which to me doesn't seem like a whole lot of green tree pythons listed on Morph Market if you compare the other categories. So I think Morph Market is a great place to start, but you're right, it can only take you so far in vetting, the eventual animal that's going to be right for you. You have to take that, and then you have to go with other avenues like, word of mouth is a great one, because our community, although it's growing, it's still pretty small. And I don't know every person in the green tree community, but I bet I know somebody that does know, a particular source if an animal is available on Morph Market. So I would go, start with Morph Market, find an animal or some animals that you're interested in that are in your price range. And then that's when the process starts of vetting the animal, vetting the seller and all that kind of stuff.
And what would be like a one way you would tell someone to vet a seller? Like, for instance, like what's a good like first step doing that, Bill?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, word of mouth. If you can get involved in the green tree python community, and there's certainly ways to do that. Be involved in podcasts like this, listen to podcasts like this. Hell, every single guest you've had on the podcast, is by definition a vetted seller. Anybody that's producing, that's been on the podcast, boom, right there. There's a great list to start with. But get immersed in the community. It's not going to happen overnight. Join the Facebook groups. There's two big Facebook groups. There's Morelia Viridis Forum, which I'm one of the admins there. There's 15,000 members. And then there's Morelia Viridis Python, Green Tree Python, and Stephen Saltzman and Stephen Brown administer that. 50,000, I think, members there. So get in there, make a post, ask some questions, and you'll start figuring it out. It's a small enough community.
So overall, you would say the keeping side of a green tree python is a lot easier than people would expect it to be, right?
Again, it's one of the reasons that Buddy and I started GTP Keeper Radio back in 2014. It was dispel some of the myths about green tree pythons, and some of those myths are well deserved. You buy an imported adult biak from a show, and you're going to get exactly what you think you're going to get from that animal. But there are other avenues to go, and these things can be as easy to keep as a ball python.
So when should someone, because like I said, not everyone has the same level of pockets coming into this, Bill. And people love seeing these green tree pythons, but at what point does somebody, decide buy an import or buy something that's United States captive-born and bred based off price, and why would there be such a price difference? If you could explain that.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I'm a big supporter, especially if it's going to be your first green tree python, to buy a U.S. captive-bred animal from a reliable source. Some people don't like to talk about price because price can be, kind of a difficult thing, uncomfortable thing to talk about. But the bottom line is, you got to have about $1,000, to spend on a well-established baby chondro from a reputable source. Now, you can go an imported route and, that are going to be less, not substantially less from what I've seen, on Morph Market. And there's some reliable imported sources out there. Dan Malari comes to mind. He's got a good reputation. Alex Warren has purchased multiple animals from him. He's had good success. Always NIDO tested, always sexed correctly. But Alex has a lot of experience with green tree pythons. And, it wouldn't be my recommendation for your first go-to.
Now, you can't help but to think that when people get into the reptile world, not everyone, but a lot of good portion of them think about breeding right off the bat. And what would you have to say to somebody buying a green tree python with intentions of breeding them?
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of us, it's just in our blood, right? Like if I was told I could keep something but couldn't breed it, I don't know if I'd keep it. I mean, for me, I get a lot of fulfillment in breeding these things, whether it's ball pythons or carpets or green trees. Right. So I understand people's wanting to get in and do it as soon as possible, because most people that get a green tree, they fall in love with it, right? And so if everything goes well, then of course they're thinking about breeding it. But I'd say you should at least have a year's experience with, keeping an animal successfully before you then, if you want to roll the dice and try breeding after a year, go for it. That's probably for a different episode. But my suggestion would be, in the way that I've had the most success, are get these animals when they're young, raise them up in your environment, and those are the ones that are really going to be star reproducers for you.
Another thing I feel like first-time keepers or just people who are just now getting their feet wet with green tree pythons can't help but get excited about the sex ratio. Like they want to know the sex ratio. Like, is it a male or is it a female? When you have somebody like that, Bill, like a customer of yours, what do you tell them? It's tough. I mean, green tree pythons cannot be safely sexed as hatchlings. Their tail's too fragile, and they're just at high risk for developing tail kink by popping it, certainly, or even probing it, I think. So you just have to be patient. I like to sex my animals when they're about 18 months old. Some people will do it sooner, but the vast majority of my stuff gets sold as unsexed neos. And it's not that big of a deal in the green tree python game as it is like the ball python game, where you have one male breeding potentially 6 or 8 females throughout a season. The green tree world is much smaller, and it's more of a 1-to-1 or 1-to-2 ratio. So if you get 3 animals, and the worst case scenario, you end up with 3 males, things will work themselves out. You'll be able to trade that animal or sell it. And then, you move on to the next, your next animal. As you know, the technology is there to shed, to sex baby green trees from shed analysis. Yeah, shout to RGI, definitely.
But right now, it's a very complex procedure, and it's just not cost prohibitive to do it. So,
for now, at least, right?
For now, yep.
Yeah. So, Bill, what's one thing that comes to mind when thinking, like, what's one thing somebody should never do when buying a green tree python? What's a big no-no?
There's a couple of them, but probably number one that comes to mind is don't make it an impulse buy. We see it every reptile show we go to. We see a green tree python impulse buy. Somebody sees a beautiful, awesome looking yellow neo in a deli cup on somebody's table, and they go, today's the day I'm going to get a green tree python. That's probably not your best strategy for success. So no impulse buys.
Yeah. And then what's one thing always to do when buying a green tree python?
Buy it from Bill Stegall or MJ.
I like that.
Hey, and congratulations on hatching, establishing, and then selling your first green tree python.
Yeah, listen, I don't have quite the stock like Bill Stegall has, but I finally did kind of get some success, which, I recently had a vlog that came out today, and I made it clear, like, this was not handed to me whatsoever. Like, and as you know, Bill, you and I have been close friends for the last handful of years, but you've seen me go through like prolapses, establishing babies and everything like that. But it's kind of what brings everything to full circle, you know, when you get to the level of breeding, right? Not to make breeding sound like it's like anything like godly, but I'm just saying you do go through some like humbling, like pride breaking moments with green tree pythons, like especially when, you know, you never want to here's the thing, you don't count your eggs before they hatch, literally, with green tree pythons. And I'm somebody who's just so overly excited, and I did that way too many times. But the green tree python gods will serve you that hot plate of, I told you to shut the hell up, every single time.
Every time. Yes. Every time they will. And yeah, we all pay our dues when trying to reproduce these things. You certainly paid more than your fair share of dues on the front end. So I was glad to see, obviously, your success for a lot of reasons. But yeah, you did. Yeah. You stayed with it. You learned from your mistakes and other people's mistakes, and every year it got better and you got closer, and then you just did it.
Yeah. And I want to thank a lot of the mentorship I've had. Like, you know, you've been a huge help, along with a handful of our other close friends. But for anyone out there who's in the market of looking for mentorship, but maybe they have they don't know how to ask, or they're not that type to put themselves out there, but maybe they need the help. What's some advice for someone out there who could look for mentorship? Because here's another thing too, Bill, like some people feel like they should be a customer of that person before asking for mentorships. And you know, before, I mean, I don't know, I don't want to talk our business, but you've helped me before I gotten anything from you before. You know what I mean? So yeah. I don't know, how can someone get help with mentorships out there when they're having a hard time finding it or even asking for it?
Yeah, it's a difficult question. You know, anybody that purchases an animal from me, by definition, I become a mentor to them.
Right.
Whether it's that animal, or, you know, even different animals, or breeding in the future. You know, that's just something that kind of comes with the territory when somebody purchases an animal. When you're coming to other people for advice and questions, and MJ, we've had this discussion. I get it a lot, man. I get it a lot. And sometimes I can help, but I can't answer every single person, you know, every single question, every single person, you know, that wants me to help them, mentor them, either keep, establish, or produce green tree pythons. There just doesn't seem to be enough hours in the day sometimes. So, you know, I would encourage somebody to get a mentor. Start with the Facebook groups and start lurking there. You'll be able to figure out pretty quick who knows what and who's active. And, you know, you can always reach out to people there. And then obviously, you know, with this day and age of Patreons and subscription services and all that, you know, there are other ways that you can get more personalized one-on-one mentorship as well.
Because I mean, I think this deserves maybe a whole episode on Trap Talk, but man, like how to move on Facebook groups, you got to be careful. Like,
well, you get what you pay for sure.
For sure. But, you know, like, you know, somebody said in the comments, like, man, I ask a simple question in some Facebook groups and I get slaughtered, you know, and I don't think that happens. I will say that doesn't happen on every Facebook group, but it is almost easy to happen in damn near every Facebook group, as you've seen, Bill.
Well, what I would do is, you know, try to identify over some time people's postings that make sense to you.
Yeah.
And then hit them with a direct message. You know, you don't have to post it in the group, but, you know,
I highly agree on direct messaging if you really have a question and you want to get an answer versus like some smart ass replies or something like that, for sure.
Yeah.
Because directly people don't act, you know, especially if someone were to come to you, you're not that person talking like that in the comments. You know what I mean? But, you know, you got just people who, you know, just, it's Facebook. What are you going to do?
Yeah, we should all be used to it by now.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. All right, let's get to a hot one here. You know, listen, red versus yellow. Now, I'm not trying to make this a debate, right? But a big question I get all the time is why get yellow or red or yellow? Why is there a price difference, et cetera, et cetera? But why don't we break down the whole, what is a red neo and what is a yellow neo? And I'm going to pull up your chart right now, Bill, just to kind of make things easier for people.
Sure.
But why don't you take it from here? Take it from here, Bill.
So I thought when you were initially asking that question, you were going to try to bait me about price and reds being better than yellows, but I wasn't going to go for that. But for this chart, and this was a chart that I presented at the Reptile Talks in Anaheim last May, and people may or may not know that pattern and design in green tree python adults is polygenic, right? I mean, a lot of genes involved to get a blue animal or a melanistic or a yellow animal. But neonate coloration is different. It's more what like ball python and boa people are used to. It's simple Mendelian genetics, where red is the dominant phenotype and yellow is recessive. So if you just look at this example where you had two parents, green tree pythons that were red neonates, how it's possible for them to not only produce what we call red dominant offspring, but also to produce the recessive small r, which would be a yellow neo. And if you extrapolate that out, if you're working with two adults that were both yellow neos, they'll never produce a red animal. Everything will be yellow.
Wow. And so what makes a red, and not to ruffle any feathers out there for the yellow lovers, but theoretically, what would make something red more appealing when we're thinking designers and stuff like that versus yellow, you know?
Yeah. It's just been the history of where and we're talking particularly designer animals now when we're talking about why somebody would want a red neo over yellow. And it's just been historically the red neonates have been the ones that have gone on to produce animals that have become high blue and high black. They can become high yellow too. Red neos can definitely evolve into high yellow animals. But if you're looking for high blue and you're looking for high black potential in an adult, then, you know, the vast majority of the time, you're going to want to start with a red neo. If you're looking for high yellow, you can start with yellow or red, animals. But that's the reason they're more expensive, because the high blue and the high black is what people want.
Well, for anyone out there thinking, what does Bill Stegall want? Why don't you lay that out, Bill? What is it that excites you, Bill, even though you produced, the Sickness and Freight Train and, the list goes on, Jaeger, and you didn't produce Jaeger, but Jaeger is a huge part of everything. But, the list goes on. But what is it that, with everything you've been doing at this point, what is a goal in your head for that perfect chondro that you can produce?
Yeah, for me, it's melanistic stuff. I mean, almost everything I work with is either melanistic or blue line. And I think there's a lot of synergy between blue and black. And we've seen that in offspring of both animals. High blue animals throw black offspring, and highly melanistic animals can throw animals with a lot of beautiful blue and black. So my perfect chondro is really, about a 50-50 distribution of bright blue on black. That's what I really, really like.
And would you also kind of get back to the red versus yellow, like in a sense for what you're aiming for? Don't you feel like the reds that you produce give you a better idea what direction the neo's going versus making a yellow or looking at a yellow? Like, I mean, I feel like the reds paint a better picture straight out of the egg versus some yellows, you would say. And that's another thing why it's easier to just hold something back that's damn near black. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for me personally, it is. I produce so few yellows in comparison to red. I've just seen so many more reds as neos, and then what they've gone on to do into adulthood. So for me, it's easier to pick reds. But if you've seen some of the stuff that I've released over the last few years, you'll agree I'm not a very good picker of holdbacks. Way too many escape me. But that's okay. That's fun too. I wouldn't know what to look for, to be honest, in a yellow neonate to say, oh, that one may turn high yellow.
It's just too much work up here. Like, it's too much thinking. I don't want to think that much. Like, I want my eyes to just be like, yep, that's it. And that's it. We just move on. But
it's okay. It's okay to be able to just say, I like it because I like it. You don't have to say why.
But man, if it's one thing Bill Stegall's known for, is letting some gems go. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what makes Phoenix Reptiles what it is. And you're proud of that, I feel like.
Absolutely. There's nothing that excites me more than to see somebody get one of my animals, and when it's 2-year-old, it just looks magnificent. So,
yeah. All right. I got a wrap up question for you before we get into some closing statements, Bill. But for anyone out there who is looking to maybe get rich off breeding green tree pythons, for whatever reason, listen, maybe they got rich or got good money in a different area in the reptile world, but now they're thinking green tree pythons. Man, I want to get rich breeding green tree pythons. What would be your reply to that?
Well, I would say that it can be done. I mean, history tells us it can be done. A couple of people, that we know, Greg Maxwell made good money exclusively breeding green tree pythons for many years. Rico Walder did as well. But I can say that it's really probably like most other breeding reptiles. It's the exception and not the rule. I think people are better served to build their green tree python collection slowly, with organic growth, and then, best case scenario, hope to supplement their income from green tree python production. So that would be my 2 cents.
And listen, I have something that I'm kind of wasn't a part of the outline I sent you, but it just dawned on me, because I know one thing that you don't mess around with, Bill, no matter where the person lives or how much money is spent. If it's not safe to ship, you will not ship, correct?
Oh yeah, it's a no-brainer. And in Texas, I have a pretty wide shipping window. It's usually where the animal is going that dictates my shipping, because I can find a week, usually 12 months out of the year, where it's warm enough for me to ship here. But it has to be perfect. I assume that the animal is going to be lost 24 hours. So I look at weather patterns for 2 days. And it just has to be perfect. All the onus is on me as a shipper, and I'm putting a very expensive animal in a box. It's going to have to be on my terms.
Yeah, or just and I'm thinking, in just any animal in general, I feel like should be thought of first before considering shipping during the holidays. You got people actually shipped on Christmas Eve, like it's crazy.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, we've seen it all, but yeah, wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, Bill, any closing statements, anything that you like to close off for anyone who is watching, or, anything you have to say on Morph Market, anything you want to see change or anything like that? What do you have to say, Bill?
Well, anybody can contact me, that's watching this episode, either through Facebook or Instagram. And, like I say, I feel like I'm able to answer the vast majority of questions, especially if it's a one or two here or there. But if you send me a message like, how do I breed green tree pythons? You're probably not going to get a response to that. If you have specific questions, I'm happy to help. As far as Morph Market goes, I think we kind of touched on it in the beginning. It's the best resource for buyers and sellers that there's ever been, in my opinion. To get that first animal or sell that first animal, but use it as a resource. Use it as a starting point, and follow up with other avenues. I'm glad to see Morph Market's success, because if Morph Market wasn't here, then we'd be back to some other options that weren't as valuable as Morph Market.
Craigslist, king snakes,
fauna. Yeah. I've seen them all, and no platform is perfect, but I think Morph Market has really done an exceptional job at vetting sellers.
So for people wondering, like, man, how can I get a Bill Stegall, production? And I know, Bill, you do wait lists, and you're one of the few people who do the wait lists because you have no choice. You're flooded. But what's the best way for people to approach you about maybe getting one of your snakes? Just simply by hitting you up on Instagram, or what do you suggest with that?
Yeah, Instagram is probably the best way to go. Phoenix Reptiles. I've heard that some people, my messages have not been going through on Instagram. So if you send me a message and I don't reply, then please try to send me a message on Facebook. I'm just Bill Stegall on Facebook. But yeah, send me a message. Probably the vast majority of people that message me for their first green tree python, I talk them out of getting an animal from me, to be honest. I put them into different resources. I'm happy to help them find their first green tree. But unless you have arboreal experience, I wouldn't recommend one of my animals for your first green tree, just because of price point.
Unless you got deep pockets. I mean, what are you going to do?
Yeah, but you need to have deep pockets, and you need to have some experience with arboreals too.
100%. I agree, man. And listen, I appreciate you, Bill, for stopping by. Phoenix Reptiles on Instagram, and also every Tuesday on the Trap Talk Reptile Network. Him and Marshall Mendez, co-host On the Tree Tuesdays with me. And Bill, you're a real one, man. You're really a huge inspiration. I could definitely not just me, a lot of people out there. So really happy to have you be a part of this Friday show, and obviously on Trap Talk, and just being a good member to the reptile community. Thank you so much.
Well, I can't thank you enough for thinking about me to be, your first person on the Morph Market segment to come in and talk specifically about green tree pythons. So
yeah,
thank you for that opportunity, and I will see you Tuesday.
See you Tuesday, man. Please give it up for the mayor of Chondro Town, Bill Stegall, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Bill.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, everybody that's watched and will watch in the future.
See you Tuesday, buddy.
See you, bud.
All right. Hope you guys enjoyed this Friday's Morph Market show. Please head over to Morph Market. Make sure you follow Phoenix Reptiles and also follow Bill on Instagram as well. And don't forget All in the Tree Tuesdays. If you want to learn about green tree pythons and go down that hole, then please go down the Chondro rabbit hole with me on Tuesdays with Bill Stegall, Marshall Mendez, and really, really, really cool guests. But thank you so much again, guys, for hanging out. If you think today's episode was worthy of a like, please hit that like button and hit that subscribe button. And please don't ship during bad times to ship. It's really not worth it, guys. Put the animal first. Really, especially sellers who are getting pressed by customers. Sellers have the power in a sense, right? You can simply say it's not safe for the animal to ship. And if the customer can't understand that, then I don't know if that customer is even capable of keeping an animal. I think we should understand that, right? So let's just be more thoughtful and more methodical when it comes to shipping your reptiles. And don't forget that Morph Market Shipping is the #1 shipping company in the reptile industry. Save some money, okay? And save a lot. And that's what it comes down to. So thank you to anyone out there who supports Morph Market. All my fellow Morph Market members, you guys are awesome. But that's a wrap for this Morph Market show, episode 5 in the book. Thank you, Bill Stegall. And thank you to every single out there who supports this show. Have a good weekend. I'll see you next week.